It's nice. It's just like having a family reunion, talking to friends. I know so many of you. For so many years, some of you. It's lovely. So, got my paper today. Well, just in case I forget, the 32 attributes of Nibbana. 32 adjectives to define Nibbana in one of the suttas. So I didn't want you to miss that, so I made sure it was on a piece of paper. So, you've read the title, haven't you? Did it intrigue you? Yes. Did it confuse you? Yes. Yes. Well, that's good, because that's what it does to most people, really. Including monks and nuns at some point. Even though we do have a tool, fortunately, to see the arising of thoughts in our mind and the passing away of it. So we don't have to linger too long figuring out Nibbana. Or what is Nibbana. Yet, there is a curiosity in our mind, isn't it? To discover what we don't know. If you're a curious type, likes for exploring, use your brain, use your senses to basically find out what you're looking for, what you're interested in. You know, it's very important to have that kind of awakened energy in ourselves that is really truly curious about how things work, how things are. And suddenly Nibbana comes at the top of how to figure out that one, you know. And I think this kind of, you could say, condition of really being completely befuddled with what is Nibbana, what is, you know. So suppose, according to the title, is why is Nibbana so unattractive? I think that's a word. Huh? And why is peace so boring? I still remember these thoughts crossing my mind many, many years ago. Not exactly in the kind of that form, but just figure out what would happen when I was going to reach arahantship and Nibbana, basically the end of me, the end of my world, the end of my fun, the end of my life. I felt, you say, what is it? If I didn't think very logically that maybe the end of greed, hatred, and delusion will be much more fun than just swimming in the suffering of greed, hatred, and delusion at that time. I just felt that something terrible would happen to me. That's how my mind would just bring up these kind of questions. What happened when I'm just peaceful all the time? What a bore. The French are not particularly into that kind of peace. They like chatting and discussing and redoing the world again 100 times a day sometimes. So I was part of this culture, and I would say, wow, what would happen to me if I'm just a peaceful human being? I like peace, but up to a certain point. A bit of fun and a bit eccentricities and a bit of, kind of thing that rebellious, a little bit rebellious and kind of humorous, sort of making fun of things, making fun of people, making fun of life, making fun of, and then I had to abandon that, of course. And if I thought about it, I say, how can I abandon being humorous and making jokes and having fun? I repeat it, I think many of us want to have a bit of fun, except when you come to a certain age, fun has kind of run out of steam a bit, We can have fun in a different way, but, So, is peace boring? Is Nibbana unattractive? Can you tell me there's a right adjective? Sometimes I could have said unappealing, But anyway, it's the same thing, really. And so, it is an interesting dilemma, because when For many decades, I think Buddhism in the West was interpreted as a rather nihilistic teaching, tradition of teaching, kind of pointing to rather nihilistic reality. And so it took a while for the Westerners to come to understand that Nibbana had nothing to do with being nihilistic or annihilistic. It's just a term to designate the end of suffering. Now, for most people, maybe the kind of suffering that I will talk to you about might not be so apparent, so familiar, so much an experience that you have seen clearly, maybe. So, when the Buddha was asked, "What is Buddhism? What do you teach?" So we have thousands of teachings of the Buddha to guide you through the path of Buddhism. But it was interesting when he would just say, "I teach suffering and the end of suffering." That doesn't leave much for the intellectual mind, does it? To get really excited about philosophy and metaphysics and so on. It's just like, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. So the mind, if the interpretation of the mind without really much training, will say, "Well, I don't suffer. I'm fine. What's the problem? Is that Buddhism? That's Buddhism. I don't think I'm fit for it. I'm just going to go and be more clappy, having fun in another religious form, do maybe dervish dancings or something, rather than to have that thought in my mind, I teach suffering and the end of suffering." Now, the end of suffering is quite appealing and attractive, isn't it? Looking at suffering to come to the end of suffering, that's more difficult to bridge the two, right? Most people are really in a hurry to get rid of suffering, but they don't know how to do it. And the way they do it, they just keep piling up suffering because they just work from a reactivity of the mind. How can I get rid of it? How can I be free from suffering now? Give me a weekend, £3,000, I don't mind, but just to go to the end of suffering, the end of the Buddhist teaching, understand a whole lot with £2,000, £3,000, and great, Yeah, there's many such things that exist in the world, believe it or not. So, in a way, the whole teaching of the Buddha, every aspect of the teaching of the Buddha, is to help us to incline to what he calls Nibbana, to direct our attention, our activity towards the end of suffering. It's personally, I find it's the most compassionate gift that the Buddha has offered to mankind, is how to understand the suffering of a human life, even when everything is going well. Like I used to say, getting what you want is painful. Not getting what you want is painful. Getting what you don't want is painful. That's the definition of the first noble truth of suffering. But then getting what you want and you hurt as well, it's painful as well. Then where do you go from there? And many people here have sure experienced this situation where you get what you want and it takes very short time to feel dissatisfied with it. Mostly because you begin to be aware that that thought has just moved on and you're onto the next turn of the wheel of desire. Already the mind is already filled up with something you want. It's like the kids. We often see the kids when they get a toy, they're kind of driving their parents crazy to get a toy for Christmas or something. A few days later, it's in the bin somewhere, they just have lost all interest in this, whatever they wanted to so badly to get as a Christmas present. Well, we are a bit like in the same conditions in a way. We are adult, yes, adult, but emotionally, from my experience, we're not so far from being quite young, very young in emotional level. We still hope to get what we want and get very distressed when we don't. We still hope to not be faced with the thing we don't like and get incredibly stressed to try to get rid of anything we don't like. Yeah? Whether it's a partner, whether it's what you wanted at the meal and somebody just took it in front of you, it was the last thing you had on your plate, was on the plate of the servery offered, Oh, what a... And then if you're not really mindful, you start attacking that person in front of you who innocently took the last cake that you'd been looking at, even before the meal. He was hoping. So hope has great positive side, and it can be great disaster for happiness, because you can easily be terribly disappointed quite quickly, as you probably noticed in your life. You hope for something, and that usually condition despair in a small dose or big dose, but not despair in a sort of, going to throw yourself in the Thames River, but simply disappointment and just kind of being miserable. Dukkha, what the Buddha calls dukkha. So it's not a matter of, nibbana is not particularly attractive. It's not a quality that you can define nibbana with. But I just wanted to, I brought these because that always struck me. I just loved it, when I find it many years ago. And in a way, it shows you that we have a hard time finding out what this piece of the end of suffering is about. Because there are about 32, I think. So the Nibbana, I just read it to you, and you can, focus on any point, any aspect of it. So Nibbana is the unconditioned. Right? We live in a conditioned world. Our mind is a conditioned mind. Okay, the unconditioned is very foreign for us. What is the unconditioned? That which is not caused by one thing or another, causeless. That that doesn't move, doesn't change. So unconditioned, the destruction of lust, hate, and delusion, sometimes referred to as ignorance. The uninclined. What it means by this, we're inclined to one way, and the mind moves this way and that way. I like, I don't like. I hate, I love. It keeps moving one way or the other, in this kind of dualistic mode. The taintless, which means the pure mind, without taints, without what we call kilesa, or afflictive state of mind, or destructive state of mind, negative state of mind. Yeah. The truth, the other shore, the subtle, the very difficult to see, the unaging, the stable, the undisintegrating. Everything passes away and change, dies. The unmanifest, the unproliferated, the peaceful, the deathless, the sublime, the auspicious, the secure, the destruction of craving, the wonderful, the amazing, the unailing state, the unafflicted, the dispassion, purity, freedom, non-attachment, the island, the shelter, the asylum, the refuge, the destination, and the path leading to the destination. So this is some of the adjectives describing Nibbana. So it's nothing that has to do with nihilism, annihilism. It's really what you discover little by little, by contrast. What is it that is not Nibbana? What is it that I experience when I'm not peaceful, when I am distressed, when I am confused, when I am restless, when I am unhappy? That is not Nibbana. Nibbana is the end of greed, hatred, and delusion, and happiness and unhappiness come from those roots. Yeah, and we have, fortunately, a path that defined by the Buddha, you see, established by the Buddha, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is a fourth noble truth. So the first noble truth, instead of aiming at higher realms and trying to find what people might want to know, like what is its divine realm of happiness, and maybe nibbana may be. Many people think it's a state of the mind that is going to take you to a higher realm of existence, and eventually you'll be sitting in a kind of divine, purified, happy, ecstatic mind state or world, universe. So when you describe the unconditioned as an ecstatic, endless joy and peace realm of existence, of course, people are really wanting to go there, don't they? They're not going to dilly-dally, especially when they are miserable. They want something as beautiful as that. I didn't see the beautiful here, but I've seen an adjective, nibbana, also the beautiful. And so what we have really is this proposal or offer or deal, you could say, in the Buddhist teaching. You say, do you want to be free? Do you want to be, do you want to let go of the thing that makes you miserable? Do you really want to understand what this life that manifests in your mind, how does that arise and how does that end? Does it ever end? People who are depressed think it never ends. And they never see the nature of their mind, their body, or they might not see it in a way that is sustained enough to get a clear picture. Yeah? So, we're not talking about a teaching that is going to be peace, describe peace as a kind of, again, as a realm of existence that is attractive, particularly. It becomes attractive when you really experience the peace of the ending of suffering, of the suffering you experience in yourself. And at first, we have a hard time. We spend a great part of our life either looking for peace and happiness or sort of avoiding anything that is not in the line of that hope, of that desire. If it's not according itself with that wish to have happiness and well-being, then unfortunately the mind starts doing things that are going to compound your misery. The Buddha talks about suffering as being the first arrow as an image, the image of a wounded man, wounded by an arrow. And instead of really recognizing that he needs help rapidly, or otherwise he's going to die, he's apparently asking, who sent it, what kind of arrow was it, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't realize he's dying and keeps on asking questions. So that's the first arrow, is the dukkha that we experience in life, the fact that we are born and then we grow up and then we age, and then we get sick also during our lifetime. Sometimes big children get sick very early in their life, and then we die. So that's, and then the untrained mind is full of miserable emotions and mind states and desires. So a lot of unfortunate things crossing our mind again constantly under the kind of mind state that will be under one umbrella of like greed and hatred, anger or selfishness, wanting for me first, and then the top one, ignorance. That's what's going to feed all this, So you realize that for a long, long time we struggle with our human life because we don't have the tools that are going to help you to live and work with this reality of being stuck and caught up in a very dualistic way of appearing in the mind. The mind is like yes or no, good or bad, and with, subtle level of these things, of course, but still, it's still functioning, not from a place of peace, from a place of reactivity. That's all we know. We don't know much more than that. I know that very well. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And at first, it's overwhelming to realize this. It's very, when I realized that, I thought, my God, how am I going to get myself out of this dilemma? Before I was a Buddhist nun, I had already seen a lot of that reactivity of the mind, the second arrow. And I was really puzzled. How am I going to find a way through the mind that keeps kind of, moving into kind of a yo-yo movement? You're constantly, yes, no, I like, don't like, with everything, every object of the senses. Not just the body, but also the mind, the eyes, the ears, nose, tongue, etc. Plus the mind and its kind of fixed ideas, opinions and views and perception of things. So it's like this and never like that. She must be like, she must not do that because it's wrong. And, we have all our stories under this kind of umbrella. Fixed views and fixed ideas, opinions, I repeat, all right? I still remember the first sister, Rojana, who passed away in 1987, when we were interviewed by journalists who came down to Chithurst, and somebody asked her how she was 50, so she was about 20 years older than us. 50 seemed to be really old in those days. And, you thought 50, you can't do anything more. Everything was difficult at 50. By the time you get to my age, you think, we're already young at 50. I could do many things that I never thought I could do now, But she was asked, how can you cope with a lifestyle here? I mean, you have only one main meal a day, you work all day long physically, and you sleep only 5 hours, 6 hours per night. You have to walk up the hill to go to the main meditation hall. It's cold, it's damp, there's no heating, there's nothing, it's dark, it's 4 o'clock, you go up, 4:30, you go up the hill with nobody around, nothing, And she said, she had a good sense of humor, I have to say. She said, oh no, that was nothing, The hardest thing is to give up my views and my opinions. I think she gave us a wonderful teaching, which I really like to bring, So people think, oh my God, if I live a life like this, it's going to be terrible. No, it's the life you have in your mind already, right now. You're living with it day and night. Do you understand? Your views and your opinions. And they never really challenge until somebody tells you you're wrong. So it's not easy to be to have the mirror of our own chitta, because we don't have it. We very often just kind of fixed in our views and opinions and just talk with the people who agree with me. Or we're not going to challenge me in my opinions, We're going to stay put and going maybe frightened to challenge you. And it is frightening to be challenged, because maybe you don't have what it takes to respond skillfully, wisely, kindly, at least harmlessly, without, bringing a lot of hatred in your mind. So, Nibbana is not a question of being attractive or not. Is it pointing something in you to something you can relate to when you start looking at your own suffering? I just like the simple definition of the end of the suffering, seeing suffering, and the end of suffering is another form of nibbana, aspect of nibbana. When all suffering has ended, the Buddha says, this is nibbana. So we have, a training in a way that the Buddha has described and experimented himself, obviously, that gives us a glimpse of nibbana. It's not the ultimate nibbana, but you get, through your meditation practice, you begin to have a glimpse of what, and because emotionally, this word nibbana doesn't really kind of grip us, doesn't it? It doesn't grip. It doesn't have a kind of sense of, wow, I want to go there. There was nowhere to go anyway, because nibbana is just the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. The absence. It's not another state of mind. It's when all has gone. And then you realize Buddha was an arahant, and he's obviously taught for 45 years and established a teaching that is still lasting 2,500 years later. So obviously he hadn't lost his mind, has it, completely? There's something that kept functioning after he became an arahant. That's what people often fear. The suddenly death of me. And they think if me is going to die, then there'll be nothing left of me. Nothing left of my me world. Nothing left of my emotional world, which can be very beautiful and also very tragic in the extremes. Very beautiful and this emotional world can be very, amazingly inspiring and also amazingly destructive. So the Buddha doesn't say we have to get rid of our emotions. He just basically kind of guides us towards seeing that whatever you are attached to, is it dukkha or is it not dukkha? He's not saying, maybe he said this is dukkha, but really the path is a questioning of our life. And he's kind of turning our attention towards something which most human beings would not want to do, to turn your attention to the suffering of one's human mind. It takes some conditions to be able to survive it, survive the experience, without being depressed or wanting to, totally despair about your life forever. Well, what is very clear is that when you start not even meditating formally, I remember I came to this tradition, not because I was a Buddhist, I was nothing particularly, but I had already seen that my life, even though I had materially, I was happy, I was even had a good husband, it's quite, not very often you get a good person, to be as your husband, a good relationship, yet, maybe because I was curious, I suppose, I did not know how to define my suffering, because it was not. I could not blame it on. I could blame it on maybe what I was doing, or how I was feeling, or what I wanted and I didn't get, and so on. But we don't have a vocabulary that leads to the sense of inspiration to walk this path and discover what this suffering is leading us to. Because my knowledge of suffering as a layperson before I met the Buddhist teaching was it was very difficult to find a way out, and unless you distracted yourself, you did something else. Unless you thought you just moved away from it. It was a sense of what the Buddha calls a vibhava tanha, the desire to get rid of things and the desire to get. That's the cause of suffering. Bhavatanha, to become. When I'm happy, maybe I have this desire that keep popping up to want more happiness. And when I'm unhappy, there's an energy of desire. I just want to push that away. At very subtle level. It's not just a thought. It's an energetic body level. Do you understand? It's wordless. It's without concept. It's energetic. So sometimes we miss that, because we're still thinking about Buddhism, and we're thinking to our way out of suffering, and we're thinking about, why is that taking me anyway? So then I realized that I did not know the third way, so to speak, the middle way. I did not know the middle way. But then, at some point, I noticed one thing, and maybe that can help you as well. I noticed one thing, without being a Buddhist, that when I had a peaceful moment in my heart, something very, very different. I was beginning to get to know what some people have called, John Coleman has called the silent mind. The silent mind. So it's the aware mind. I didn't know the aware mind. I didn't call it the conscious mind. I didn't call it anything. The experience of peace in those moments were beginning to give me a sense of another world. And I did not know what other world it was. Just a sense of being connected with something that was very different from my fear, my angst, my anger, my opinions, my views to which I was attached to, or, views and opinions are not a problem if you're not attached to them. You can just watch them and say, hello, I haven't seen you for a while, right? You can just make friends with them, but you don't have to go and kill somebody because they think differently from you. And many people can do that mentally. Don't look at nothing. It never happened to you. How much we want to destroy somebody. Even the happiness, simply because they don't agree with you. That's the power of opinions and views, and deep attachment. Usually, the deeper the attachment, the more you'll be angry and frustrated if somebody disagrees with you. So this is, going back to the opinions aspect of the mind and the treacherous kind of result of that. So, Ajahn Sumedho used to say, peace is an acquired taste. Just bringing Ajahn Sumedho makes everybody happy, I notice. It's an acquired taste. He was so, a virtuoso, really, to explain Buddhist teaching, from the point of view of Western psychology, because his mind was a Western mind conditioned by the psychology of this culture. So he would recognize, I don't think many Asian teachers have said the same thing. It's an acquired taste. It's like, you don't get it straight away. You just have beginning to feel, to see, to experience it, and something in your heart start to awaken to it. Something in your heart begin to talk to you, or you talk to it. You have a little door open to begin to talk to that mind, that heart, that is yearning for peace, that is also yearning for liberation, from being liberated from all these conditioned realities to which we are attached and imprisoned with. We are very much imprisoned in our mind for a long, long time, until through the meditation that we practice here, some people have called it, the whole vipassana, which is just an aspect of looking at the mind, and then we have the concentration, and then the vipassana practice. And then, of course, a foundation to make sure the mind is in a good place, in a happy place, without too much remorse and too much regret and too much, the human mind is really prone to a lot of, spending a lot of time regretting and feeling remorseful about the nasty thing you've done, which might not be so nasty, but just you remember them as something very unpleasant, very hurtful to you, towards yourself or others, right? So he offered this kind of, this meditation that enables us to actually look at the mind directly, stop reading books, and Ajahn Chah said, and start reading the book of your heart. And the book of your heart is really reading the chitta, reading the mind, which is not just a brain, it's not a computer of your brain, it's the story of your life as it arises daily. And then beside that, it's also the, looking directly without, paper pages in between you and your mind, looking directly at the chitta. So that is a huge step, because then you get to know the reality of what the Buddha talks about for yourself. You know it, and so the most important thing that we learn in our meditation practice is this law of anicca, the law of impermanence, right? Buddha talks even at some point, I was reading, sort of when you see anicca, you really basically, what I remember, I'm just kind of elaborating a little bit, basically you are practicing the path and you know the Dhamma and you know also you're on the right direction for Nibbana, Impermanence, because when your mind is not seen as a kind of a reality that constantly changing, the thing that stops you from seeing the mind constantly changing is often, unfortunately, driven by fear. When you don't see anicca, you're meeting your fears. You could say you meet your ignorance as well. You meet your, the fact that you never looked at it, never really seen it, truly. And some of the things, you don't mind them being impermanent, things we don't like, good riddance, I'm glad it's all impermanent. But there are many things we're attached to for many of us who can justify for the right reasons, for good reasons. Why should I get rid of this, So I remember when Ajahn Sucitto was training the nun, he said, because he's quite extreme, at that time, he was quite extreme in his practice. And he used to say, get rid of everything. Let go of everything, sisters, except your robes and your alms bowl. So that kind of, on the conventional realities that he brought in the teaching from the ultimate, to the reality of now, the conventional reality of our life. So the Buddha is pointing to two levels of reality, the unconditioned reality and the conditioned reality. Okay? So at the moment I'm talking to a level which is it's not beyond the condition, but it's really relating to an aspect of the mind which is, a level of the meditation. Level of seeing the mind directly, what it takes to see the mind directly. After that, you can use that seeing, you can use that knowledge to deal with your mind, not seeing just the mind, but also seeing what comes out of your mind, the reality of your world now. The mind manifests as your reality now, through the eyes, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So, after you've been able to really see deeply your mind itself, that which is going to project itself in the life, then you begin to have, no, I wouldn't say a handle on it, but you begin to be a little bit more skilled in living. How do you become more skilled in living? I'm sure you know already how to be skilled in living. Some of you have lived long enough to know certainly what it is unskilled. As the longer you live, the longer you realize, oh dear, maybe I should have done it better. Oh dear, that wasn't just a good way of moving forward. But at least we remember, and maybe that particular experience leads us to a good lesson and a good... So, when we practice and look at the mind again and come back directly, then we have also a chance, fortunately, to see the truth. And the truth is that all things are impermanent. Whether you like it or not, it moves on. So you might as well get used to it. But there's one thing that's not moving, is the capacity to observe. The mind that sees, the mind that knows, it's a big name in the forest tradition. It's a big expression. What I mean by big is like, it means a lot in these two words. The puru means the person who knows. Ru, like rujak means knowledge. I know in Thai. The one who knows, the one who sees. That is always, never let me down. Never let me down once. But very often we don't have the conditions to actually establish the one who knows in ourselves, because we're still stuck on one particular thoughts, on one particular stories, on one particular whatever, something. So this is where meditation is really handy, because it unglued you for a while, from all that stuff that goes on in your mind. You get unglued for it for a little while. So you see, oh my God, there's all that thoughts going on. Then suddenly you realize that your mind was like a room filled up with stuff, lots of furnitures and lots of things going on. When you have come to a sense of peace, you're not enlightened, you're not nothing like that, but you begin to see that when you are identified, absorbed into any object of your mind, you lose the big view, you lose what you call right view, because you are blocked. So that's why it's important to use this meditation to open yourself to the space of your mind. And that comes with the peace of your mind. And then people say, well, what do I do when I'm at peace? They don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I'm quite happy not to know what to do. I can hear my mind. I don't know what to do, but at least I can hear that thought. Why do I want to know? Okay? Of course, and people will say, well, you meditate on the body, and then you look at the parts of the body, and then you look at your thoughts, and, you look at dukkha, but still the mind says, well, what do I do now? It doesn't hear the teaching. It doesn't hear. It can. I'm not saying that's not happening, but the perplexity of the mind, it goes on. So when you find peace in meditation, don't think you have finished the journey. It's just simply you're opening the space of your mind for things to arise in consciousness. And I was so happy. I have to say, Ajahn Sumedho is my how do you say, champion in the Buddhist teaching. Because he just said things that are so just basically real, Anyway, he just said this thing about knowing what to do when the mind is finding peace, and then he was just expressing that we don't find particularly a mind quiet attractive, a mind that is doing nothing. We don't find it attractive. We like an active mind. We like a busy mind, right? And I lost a little story about Ajahn Sumedho. It will come back, don't worry. Anyway, just have to recollect my mind quietly. So, Ajahn Sumedho used to say, the mind is not something you look, the Dhamma is not something you look for. You don't search Dhamma in yourself. You allow the Dhamma, through your practice, you allow the Dhamma to arise in consciousness. And I really love that because it seems so true to me. When the mind is at peace, then you allow the truth to come up without all this kind of agitation to search for something. Desire, world, searching for something. And that's what that silence I used to feel in the heart, that's what it was doing to me without being a Buddhist particularly. There's a lot of things rising in my heart, which is nothing particularly religious or divine or some kind of gods or devas or nothing. It was just a certain reality and truth that would kind of shake me a little bit or kind of make me questions. And so when Lumpo said that, I said, oh yeah. It touched me straight away. I knew what he was saying, even though I didn't have to believe him blindly. But it resonated for me. And that's what meditation sort of facilitates for you. And very often, when peace in the mind arises, people have asked me hundreds of times, what do I do when the mind is peaceful? I said, don't even ask any question. Just stay there until it ends. My mind is the same. I've got the same question, But I know it very well. So I just stay with that experience of peace, knowing it's impermanent. Do you understand? It's just an experience of peace. It's not something that suddenly turned me into a nibbanic being, or into some kind of elevated divine entity, people think they're enlightened often when they just calm. Especially in the Buddhist world, meditation, or any kind of spiritual world, they think they've, once their mind have found peace and nothing moves, they think, I've reached the end. In fact, I remember when I was in Thailand, and nearly 20 years ago, I was doing a retreat for a few years there, and I went to see a teacher who was very well known at the time. He was not so well known, but he was already quite well known in the forest tradition. And when I left his monastery to go to spend a vasa to another monastery, or another forest monastery, we had a long discussion, very funny, but he was kind of challenging me on all sides, But in the end, he said, well, you can stay in my monastery, or you can do to Ajahn monastery, but make sure that you understand what Nibbana is. Because when people practice concentration, or when monks or nuns have practiced concentration, in Thailand, there is a danger of people thinking they have reached Nibbana because they are concentrated. And there's been a lot of misunderstanding at that level, They thought they reached the path, they finished. Actually, no. And so he warned me against that, in case I was going to go into some kind of absorption practice. In case. But anyway, he was a great jhana, very, very well known for his ability to concentrate and so on. So, let me look at the time. So you could say, at some level, the whole teaching is pointing to Nibbana. The whole teaching is helping you to incline towards Nibbana, towards the end of greed, hatred, and delusion, to direct you in that way, to move towards Nibbana. Nibbana, you might not know what it is, but at least you know what is not Nibbana. And that's the most important thing. What is not the end of, the world where greed, hatred, and delusion have not ended yet. Do you understand? And what you will say, why do I have to do this? I'm quite happy with my greed, hatred, and delusion. Maybe. Well, if you're happy, just stay with it. You don't need to move out. You only move out because you want to move out. Do you understand? It's not for, remember how the Buddha was known as a physician of the mind, giving us the medicine to liberate the mind from suffering. So if you don't want the medicine, you don't need to. You're a free being. You take the medicine as you wish, But if you really realize that this medicine is really good, like I have, then the doors are open in a way for you to walk confidently on this path. The doors of the deathless are open for those who have faith, The doors of the deathless, the doors of Nibbana is another word, the deathless, the immortal, the unconditioned, are open for those who have faith. And faith is just the ability to walk without really knowing always where you're walking, towards what, but you have faith. You know something in you is stronger than your doubts. You see, one thing which I can share with you is that when I was a Chitta and started the training, I was told about the 5 hindrances: greed, hatred, and restlessness, worry, and then sloth and torpor, and then doubt. The 5 hindrances. Those 5 hindrances are very important to get to know them and to get to be non-attached to them, non-identified. Because as long as you are identified with them, they keep on recreating misery. They keep on recreating a mind that is seeing the world through doubts, through not question. I'm not talking about wise questioning of things, awakened questioning, from the awakened mind, intelligent mind, but just the mind that is constantly doubting things. Now, Of course, doubting thing is a good thing, because the Buddha himself said, don't believe me, just find out for yourself. But there's an aspect of this doubt which is called, is a hindrance, right? And this aspect of doubt is just the habit aspect, when it's just a conditioned phenomena in your mind, and it's what we call habits. You just don't doubt because you want to question. You doubt because you're just used to it. Your mind straight away. Because for a long time we think we are in charge of the mind. You think it's me doubting. Actually, as the more you practice, the more you you realize it's not me. It's just a habit moving in. Habits just setting themselves down in your chitta. Right? And the chitta is not the brain, remember, it's your world. It's around it, say where. Right? It's your story, it's your world. The world you see through the six senses, you experience through the six senses, you remember through the six senses, and so on. Yeah? So when you when you see this kind of mental state coming in, you feel, oh, I have done something wrong. You haven't done something wrong, you just don't know yet how to deal with your mind. You don't have to blame yourself for being deluded. You don't have to blame yourself for being ignorant, because you keep you keep shooting the second arrow then, again and again. That's what people do. They become Buddhist and they enter the hell realm of me, criticizing me for not being such a good Buddhist. Constantly being dissatisfied with quote unquote the Buddhist you have become. If you're not careful. Yeah, so you have to be careful not to keep sending the second arrow that makes you inclined toward the opposite of nibbana, which is suffering and misery and despair and sorrow and all the rest of it. Attachments, which mean narrow view, unskillful views, tinted by greed, hatred, or delusion. The view is not clear. And so there's another aspect that is very, very important, which comes from non-attachment. It's the aspect of observing the empty mind, the non-attached mind. That's when the path, when you are really on the path, you're on the path of mindfulness. And mindfulness is that part of the mind that is showing you attachment, but there's no attachment there. So you open your mind to something much bigger space there. No view, no opinions. You just listen. You just take into account life as it is. You see life as it is. And then maybe you respond to that, when those conditions are present, then you can then experiment the response that comes out of that mind that is non-attached. My experience from this, it's always been extremely positive. The best thing I could do in my life came always from that place of non-attachment. Now, non-attachment doesn't mean that you don't hold, if I wasn't holding my robe, maybe it'd fall apart and I start walking around with no robes. I have to hold my robes especially when it's windy like this, So it's not like you don't hold things. Ajahn Sumedho often used to say, kind of pick up an object and say, I'm attached now I'm holding this, I'm holding with my hands. My hand is attached to this bell, to this little gong. But I don't have to carry it in a tube when I go to London, do I? I mean, this is my story. Yeah. He said, I don't have to hold it forever. I just hold it when I needed it and then I put it down. Oh, that's lighter. Do you understand? So you don't have to be, it's not... You don't have to be attached to anything, but pick it up when you need it and you learn how to let it go when you don't need it. Most of the time our mind is busy with a lot of things that are just the fruits, the result of memory, being attached to memory, being attached to the past, being attached to things that are dead as a dodo, as you say in English. Right? And you still carry it on your back. And the rucksack is getting heavier every day until you meet Buddhism and start meditation, maybe. Because you learn the art of letting go. You learn the art of leaving the past behind. You learn the art of seeing suffering and the end of suffering. You learn the art of being fearless. The fear are very important to look at that, because that's what is really getting us stuck in our joy of life. That's what brought me to be a Buddhist nun. I didn't want to be a Buddhist nun anyway, or Buddhist, even Buddhist. I didn't want to be a Buddhist. I didn't want it to be just awake. I didn't know what it meant exactly, but something more intelligent than what I could concoct with my own fears and desires, So, in a way, if you don't have fun in life, if you think peace is not, interesting, just look at your mind for a while. You have a lot of fun. Especially when fear comes. You'll find out what you do then. You have a lot of fun just watching the madness of irrational mind. Saying yes one day, no the next day, just through fear, very often, through unpleasant feeling. Our mind, our world is driven by pleasant and unpleasant feeling. That's what makes us move. Do you understand? Nothing else. Nothing else. And you say, my God, my mama, if I don't have any unpleasant feeling anymore, what will I do? I won't move anymore then. Oh, what do I do? I'll just be dead on my chair. And then suddenly, out of nothing, you can speak for an hour, So obviously, I wasn't dead. I'm talking about a long time ago, not now. But, this feeling that if me is not activated somehow, nothing will happen. So people take a bigger me, like God, or, somebody else, a big guru or something that is good because it inspires you to have a more wise me in your chitta, part of your chitta. Do you understand? That you can maybe embrace and feel that you're one with or whatever. But that's not the path of liberation, To me, for my own experience, Depending on somebody else is not, for me, not a path of liberation. Inside yourself, the knowledge you get from yourself cannot be out of dependence on somebody else. Somebody else can help you and support you and guide you in the right direction. As you say, you cannot only take the horses to the source, but to the water, but you cannot make them drink. It's exactly the same spirit, You have everything. The teacher, the guru, the Buddha, can tell you what to do. But if you don't do it yourself, nothing will happen. You just keep on treading the mill of, the running mill of habits. Keeps on. Some of you have good habits, so life is not too bad. Others are habits that it's like an addiction. Many of us will consider perhaps addicted to ignorance. I gave a talk not long ago saying Amaravati was really a detox center of ignorance, greed, hatred, and delusion. So don't be depressed about what is when we describe the Buddhist teaching like that, because it doesn't take that long to get the joy of knowing. When you don't cling to things, it's so much happier. And it's so much liberating and freeing. And then that also affects your friends and your family and everybody else, because instead of being a nasty, opinionated judge and critics, you become somebody that can actually embrace other people and listen to other people with different views and opinions, and speak nicely and friendly to others, communicate in a way that actually people can hear you rather than run away or wait until it's finished. Bear with you, or just feeling that they're suffering, bearing with the suffering of one thing or another when you talk to them. So, yes, peace is an acquired taste. You need to experiment and experience it yourself. And Nibbana doesn't need to be attractive. Don't worry, you run to Nibbana when you start looking at your suffering without even doing anything, Because Nibbana is not a world, it's not a state. It's just the end of suffering. And, just to finish, I'm going to quote Ajahn Sumedho again, the end of suffering is so uninteresting for people, they never notice it. That's why they don't walk the path. Do you understand? People don't notice. It takes a lot of attention and it takes a lot of interest to not look for peace, but notice it when it's there. to actually be present when peace is there. And then, for me, little by little, it's like a refuge. After a while, it's a refuge of awareness. It's a refuge of wakefulness. It's a home that, keeps your mind sane. Otherwise, your mind is just engulfed into the whole stories of me with, colored by the states of mind of hatred or greed or selfishness or boredom, right? And so to go back to these 5 mental states, and I will end, unless these 5 mental states are either known to the point where you have stopped identifying from them completely, at least you can see them through awareness. And then you have more chance to not get caught in them, which means you have more chance to not get absorbed in those states of mind and imprisoning yourself and enabling yourself to move forward with wisdom. And in fact, the Buddha said, the wisdom will not manifest as long as greed, hatred, and delusion are present. And by present, he means you're not seeing them for what they are. You're not seeing them as anicca, dukkha, anatta, and you don't seeing them as states of mind or emotions or whatever, an object of the mind. And that is what the path is about. It's not about grand words, clever statements, philosophy, metaphysics, or anything like that. It's about the nitty-gritty of just looking at each moment as they are. And it's not something you want to claim to the world because nobody will understand you anyway. They think you're mad. You should be helping the world and, taking care of other people. And so much so that I remember at the beginning of our community when one of our monks went to Thailand. He was not, he was not one of our monks anymore. But he had an interview in Thailand. And he had spoken on behalf of the nuns, like saying, yes, the nuns one day will be will be helping in hospitals, us. Well, Ajahn Sumedho, I must say that because it's important, Ajahn Sumedho put all his effort in having the nuns not identify necessarily with potties and sick people and, and all that, babies and all that. Basically, he treated us just as a samana. And even a monk could say that. The nuns of Chetas, can, when they are really more mature, quote unquote, will be able to work in hospital and relieve the suffering of people. Why not? I mean, it's not a problem. But he does not realize the work, inner work that we are doing. It's a very profound work. Nobody can see it except in your daily life. You can begin to see, you begin to be more kind of people more happy to be with you. You be more kind of a person who can, is less, doesn't have this state, this reactivity of the mind of greed, hatred, and delusion constantly, in one form or another. And then you're more peaceful. You're a more peaceful person because you don't have any axe to grind, or grudge, or you have let go of your resentment, you let go of all these things. And then from experience that the world, at some point, I suppose it's like being vegetarian. When people cling to a bit to being vegetarian or vegan or something, you just can't have meat anymore. And at some point, you just can't, you have absolutely no faith whatsoever in dealing with life with anger, for example. It doesn't mean that the anger is not finished, but you just don't have any, it doesn't work. It's never worked and it will never worked. But of course, then you have to have also, how can I say, the skill of developing the skill of good communication. We're lucky we are at a time in this society where there's a lot of, a lot of access of developing skills in this, I say, kind communication, firm but kind, intelligent communication, I would call it, So you can't just let yourself be walk over and beaten up Although the Buddha did say, if somebody cut you in pieces, in little pieces, saw you with a two-hand saw, and and you had a moment of anger, you will not be my disciple. So I gave a wrong example, really. But anyway, we can finish maybe now, and hopefully you won't expect Nibbana to be attractive, because it's only attractive when you begin to see for yourself the end of a miserable mind. And if your mind is happy, fine. Just wait for the disease to strike and be